Hey guys, tonight we descend into the flickering shadows of a time often misunderstood, yet vividly human. Our guide, a woman not born into privilege or power, but one who carved out her place in the grimy corners of medieval society, one coin, one sigh, and one whispered prayer at a time. So before you lean back and let the tales take you, remember to like and subscribe if this kind of journey stirs something in you. And as always, I'm curious, where are you watching from and what time is it in your part of the world? Lights low, fan humming? Perfect. Let's begin. The day never really begins with the sun. It begins with the sound of someone vomiting in the alley, their retching echoing through the cracked timber walls of your building, if it can be called that. It's more like a sagging collection of boards, barely resisting gravity. Your window is no more than a gash in the wall, covered with a ragged swatch of cloth stiffened by age and smoke. Glass, that belongs to holy places and rich folk, not women who sleep on hay and earn less in a night than a butcher's apprentice. Your chamber, though calling it that feels like flattery, resembles a pen for livestock more than a space for rest. It smells like mold, sweat, and old onions. A generous mix if one's being kind. The mattress beneath you is a sad sack of straw that sighs when you shift and crunches when you don't. Something pokes at your spine. You pretend it's a souvenir from a festival you couldn't afford to attend. There's no pillow, just a tangle of discarded fabric that might once have been part of a tunic, now rolled into a lumpy mass for your neck. Above you, the ceiling groans with every change in weather, and a single beam sags like it carries the weight of 1,000 broken promises. You scratch at a bite, flee, probably, and mumble a prayer to St. Mary Magdalene, half hoping she's listening. Patroness of the fallen, maybe, or just another name whispered in desperation. Across the corridor, you hear Gertrude, your neighbor in trade, wrap up her final client of the night. A giggle, a cough, then curses aimed at rats. She always claims she once shared a bed with a nobleman. No one quite believes her, but in a place like this, imagination is its own form of survival. Then come the footsteps, slow, heavy, measured, the madame's. Ledger in hand, voice sharp as vinegar. She's already barking about debts, missing soap, and linens that look like they've survived a brawl, which, in fairness, they probably have. You sit up, the damp blanket sliding off your shoulders. It's never truly dry. Moisture clings to everything here, as if the very air sweats. There's no time to linger, no room for melancholy or self-pity, not when you're behind on rent, down to your last dab of rouge, and expected to charm your first visitor in under 10 minutes. A city watchman today, one who reeks of sour ale and demands compliments like their currency. You've practiced your lines already, rehearsed your laugh. None of it matters. What matters is making it through the hour, with your sanity and your coin pouch intact. You splash water from a basin that's been sitting since yesterday. Cold, stale, but better than nothing. The chill slaps you awake. You breathe deep. Another day begins, and with it, the same dance of feigned affection and forced smiles. You whisper to no one, another glorious day in paradise. And downstairs, the shouting has already started. You begin your routine not with glamour, but with ritualized resignation. Your eyes scan the shift dress hanging on the wall, a garment whose stains now form a mosaic of memory, some from stew, others from wine, and a few from darker origins you'd rather not contemplate. You pick it up, give it a sniff, and immediately regret the decision. It smells like last week's meal reheated by time and disappointment. There's a cracked basin in the corner, filled with water gone still and silver in the morning light. Not quite fetid, but not fresh either. It's cold enough to bite and clean enough to fool the eye. You dip a cloth in, scrub under your arms, and try to shake off the fatigue still clinging to your muscles. The soap is gone. Gertrude, no doubt. She's infamous for her selective borrowing, never malicious, just habitual, as if possession were a matter of who needs it most at the moment. You run your fingers through your hair, more straw than silk, and tie it back with a ribbon that once belonged to a better life. It used to be white. Now it's the color of dust and compromises. You think about rouge, ash, something to give your face dimension, but the truth is, the illusion of youth is better served by dim candlelight and customers too drunk to care. Dressing isn't an act of vanity, it's an obligation. By law, you're to wear red. The city demands it, not out of pity, but for taxation and control. Your gown, once a vibrant scarlet, has faded to something between rust and resignation. It announces your profession long before you speak, a flag raised not in pride, but in surrender. Shoes, mismatched, cracked, but yours, go on next. One pinches, the other flops. Still, they carry you forward. You pause at the door to your chamber. A reflective scrap of metal nailed to the wall serves as a mirror. It's warped, rusted, and hardly flattering. But it shows enough. You meet your own gaze with the practiced stare of someone who has perfected the art of seeming present while her mind floats far away. That look will earn you your keep today. Down the stairs you go, each step creaking a little louder than the last, like a warning to the building itself that you're still here, still upright, still resisting collapse. The scent of boiled cabbage, cheap ale, and stale bodies hangs in the air like a fog. The common room is already alive with movement, half-hearted, chaotic, full of noise and not enough food. You hear the madam arguing with someone about a missing lute. No one bothers to ask why there was a lute in the first place. Then comes the first client. He enters not with elegance, but with the heavy-footed swagger of a man who bakes bread for a living and believes it gives him the right to expect love in exchange. He's brought a loaf, fresh, still warm. A rare kindness, even if it's also his excuse to short you on coin again. You recognize his face. He's been here before, always with the same crooked smile and the same delusion that he's your favorite. The encounter unfolds with dull familiarity. He offers compliments with the grace of a man reciting a script he barely remembers. Your skin, he says, glows. You know it doesn't. Your dress, he claims, looks radiant. You know it smells faintly of onions. Still, you nod, you smile. You laugh at the right times. That's the real craft. Not what happens in the bed, but what happens before. The performance, the dance, the illusion of affection. He finishes quickly. Most do. And afterward he lingers, more from loneliness than lust. He speaks of his wife, of how she no longer sees him. You nod in sympathy, thinking more about whether the bread will mold before you get to eat it than about the emotional wounds he's exposing. When he leaves, he presses the loaf into your hands with reverence, like a holy offering. You thank him, knowing full well that he's left you 2 pennies short. Again. Still, warm bread is warm bread. You set it aside like a prize, a future meal, maybe even dinner if things go badly. You reset the room, fluff the straw in your mattress, light a sliver of dried lavender to mask the scent of vinegar and sweat. You prepare yourself not because you're hopeful, but because routine is the only thing that keeps the chaos at bay. And then you wait. Not for love, not for salvation, just for the next knock at the door. Downstairs, the day is already unraveling like a poorly stitched hem. Breakfast, if it can be called that, is less a meal and more a scavenger hunt. A communal table sits beneath a crooked beam, surrounded by women in various stages of wear and weariness. Marjorie is pulling straw from her hair like she's unpicking regret. Beatrice is pressing a wilted cabbage leaf to her cheek, claiming it's for a bruise but offering no explanation. And Gertrude, she looks far too satisfied with herself for someone who only sleeps when absolutely necessary. The food laid out is neither inviting nor plentiful. Stale bread crusts hard enough to spark fire, a hunk of cheese sweating like it knows it's out of place, and half a boiled onion that's seen better seasons. A single mug of watery ale passes between hands like communion, warm and cloudy like memories best forgotten. You tear off a piece of bread and pretend not to notice the mold hiding beneath the crust. The conversation drifts and eddies like the river outside. Slow, filthy, and full of strange debris. Gertrude is relaying a story about a knight who wept in her arms and asked to be held like a child. No one laughs. Beatrice mutters something about the mayor's wife slipping out the back door in the middle of the night. No one questions her. The less known, the less owed. Then the madam appears. She moves like smoke, sudden, pervasive, impossible to escape. Her voice slices through the room like the blade of a tax collector, announcing that the city inspector will be making his rounds this week. The table groans as one. It means scrubbing, patching, pretending. A farce in 3 acts performed for a man who'll pretend not to notice the mold as long as his palm is greased. You quietly tuck the last corner of edible bread into your sleeve. Desperation has long since taught you the fine art of hoarding. A good crumb is worth more than a compliment. Just as you think you might sneak away for a moment's breath, the bell above the door rings. New client. Of course. You chew quickly, fix your dress with practiced fingers, and arrange your expression into something resembling interest. You're halfway through retying your bodice when Gertrude lets out a sigh, so theatrical it could close a tavern. She places one hand on her hip and the other against the doorframe like a heroine in a bad play and declares, "Well, it's back." The room stills. Marjorie coughs. Beatrice doesn't even look up, just mutters, "Third time this season." The itch, Gertrude clarifies with exaggerated tragedy, has returned. No one is surprised. Gertrude treats life like a collection of cautionary tales and wears every mistake like rouge. She blames a foreign merchant, of course. Fur boots, suspicious jewelry, and a promise of gold. But you suspect the town scribe again. He always leaves strange stains and scribbles your name into margins of borrowed scrolls. The madam, unimpressed, arrives with a battered tin basin and a jug of vinegar. "Scrubbing stations are open," she announces, like a general declaring war. Gertrude struts to her seat as though auditioning for sainthood and begins her ablutions, singing softly as if cleanliness might be conjured with song. You keep your distance. The conversation picks up again, quieter now, tinged with vinegar and inevitability. Someone mentions a rumor, a new brothel opening near the docks, one with curtains, real mattresses, and soap that doesn't have to be rationed. For a brief, luminous moment, you all imagine it. Clients who bathe, rooms that don't creak, nights without splinters or screams. The moment passes, like all good dreams. Gertrude yelps as the vinegar hits open skin. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls, whether for prayer or warning you don't know. You grab your pouch, straighten your shoulders, and prepare yourself. Another client waits, and the day isn't even halfway done. Just as your mind begins to drift toward the idea of a stolen moment, a nap, a crumb of bread, a quiet thought, the door creaks open once more. You don't need to look to know who it is. He always arrives the same way. The bishop's nephew. Nervous, red-eyed, clutching a flask of sacramental wine like it might absolve him for what he's about to do. He walks like a man carrying not a secret, but a sermon. His robes are clerical grey, his hood too large, and his shame nearly visible in the air around him. He nods at you with a whispered, "Peace be with you," as though the phrase might sanitize the next half hour. You respond with practiced sweetness and also with your coin, and gesture him inside. He insists it's confession. It always is. But it's not the kind that ends with penance. It begins with trembling hands and some confused theology about Eve. temptation, and something about goats that you've never fully understood. He means well. You think. Or maybe he's just broken in a way he doesn't know how to fix. He brings gifts. Today it's dried figs wrapped in linen and a poem scribbled in the margins of a hymnal. The rhymes are tortured, the theology worse. Still, you accept them with grace. You were raised to know that etiquette is a shield as much as a skill. You guide him to the quieter room at the back, the one that smells faintly of incense and doubt. He asks if you've prayed for him. You lie and say yes. The truth is, you only pray when you're desperate, and never for anyone who brings you figs. The act itself is awkward, overly apologetic. He fumbles through his shame with a scholar's vocabulary and a sinner's hands. When it ends, he crosses himself and promises never to return. You nod. You've heard the same vow 12 times. He tries to offer silver. The madam doesn't allow it. Something about immunity and unpaid dues. So he leaves the figs, another prayer, and a wooden cross small enough to hide. As he exits, he nearly collides with Gertrude, who winks at him with predatory amusement. He bolts like a child who's just glimpsed the devil in lace. You sit for a moment, the figs on the table, untouched. They're old, likely dry. But still, food. You pocket them carefully, like coins. Then you light a bit of lavender to chase away the scent of guilt and incense. You check the sheets, air the room, adjust your bodice. There's no rest. Not really. The merchant from last night said he might return. He mentioned feathers. You prepare accordingly. It's late afternoon now. The sun slants low and golden through the shutter slats, catching dust in its beams like angels suspended in breath. The scent outside changes. Sweat, apples, and coin. A merchant has arrived. You hear him before you see him, the jingle of trinkets, the clack of polished boots. When he enters, it's as though he's stepping onto a stage. His clothes are velvet, the kind that whispers of better days. His beard is oiled. His fingers are decked in rings he likely can't afford. He smells like expensive perfume sprayed over something less pleasant. And he does not ask for company. He demands an experience. He says the word exotic. You do not flinch. You've heard worse. He wants to be surprised, which, in your line of work, is somewhere between a dare and a warning. You take him to the back room, the same one the bishop's nephew just exited, and begin your inventory. Feathers, a cracked mask, a scarf that barely holds together. It's not much, but imagination is your profession. You veil yourself with the scarf. Add the mask for effect. Light a candle, not for romance, but for shadow. Then you chant a nonsense phrase you once heard a Hungarian bark at a fairground. It sounded pagan enough to impress a knight once. Maybe it'll do again. The merchant claps like a child at a puppet show. You haven't done anything yet. He asks to be tied. You oblige. He requests honey. You offer molasses. He doesn't notice. He mumbles about forbidden fruit while knocking over the chamber pot. You ignore it. Performance is part of the price. When it ends, he's pleased. He tips in gold, which means dinner tonight might include something green. He leaves with your cracked mask as a souvenir and mutters something about spiritual awakening. You stare at the door for a long time after it closes. Then you turn to clean the spill, and still, the day isn't done. By now, the sun has begun its slow collapse behind the crooked rooftops, bleeding a muted amber light across the alley outside. The air thickens, not with warmth, but with stench, the unmistakable perfume of the tannery next door. It's a scent that doesn't invade so much as settle, seeping into your skin, your hair, your very bones. The blend of animal rot, urine, and ash drifts through the walls like a ghost. There is no escape. Lavender cannot mask it, nor can molasses. You've grown accustomed to it, as one does to all things unbearable. It's a quiet resignation, a dull ache instead of a sharp pain. The worst part is not the smell, but how normal it has become. Inside, the house breathes with fatigue. Gertrude is snoring face down on a bench, one arm draped over an empty jug. Beatrice is picking lice from the hem of her bodice with monk-like devotion. Marjorie is sharpening the end of a quill with a butter knife, possibly to write, possibly to stab. You don't ask. You don't want to know. You retreat to your chamber. The door creaks, the floor groans, and you step carefully over a puddle near your bed that might be water but probably isn't. You collapse onto your straw mattress, its sigh of protest almost human. The room spins gently, not from drink, but from the accumulation of the day. You allow yourself a single breath of stillness, not to reflect. Reflection is dangerous. Just to exist, your mind begins to drift, not to dreams or desires, but to dinner. If the bread remains unclaimed, it will be yours. If the rats haven't found it, if Gertrude hasn't found it, if fate allows it, a boiled root might do, a cabbage leaf, maybe even the figs. You could heat some water, pretend it's tea. But then you remember. No firewood. You burned the last of it 2 nights ago, trying to banish the cold with an overambitious bath. Through the wall, voices filter in. A merchant is arguing with someone about goats, or maybe debt. Or maybe both. It's hard to tell anymore. Someone barks. Dog or man, who can say? Then, from the alley below, that same wrenching cough echoes again. Possibly the bishop's nephew. You wonder if guilt has a sound, and if so, whether it's always this loud. You light a tallow candle. Its flame flickers and sputters, more shadow than light. You press your fingers close to it, not for beauty, but for warmth. You sit in silence, listening to the world slow down. Outside, the sky bruises into a deep purple, that particular color that always feels like the closing of a curtain. And then comes the voice. The madam's. Sharp, unforgiving, familiar as regret. Up, she calls. Another one's coming. Of course he is. You stand. Your back cracks like dry parchment. You pull your wine-stained bodice tight and force your feet back into your shoes. Every motion hurts in some way. Every movement reminds you that rest is an illusion. This house never truly sleeps. It dozes with one eye open and one ear pressed to the floorboards. Night has fallen, and in a brothel, that's when life begins. The street outside is a river of voices, laughter, curses, and bodies swaying like ships in rough water. The alehouse nearby has spilled its contents. Drunk men, a goat, someone playing a lute with only 3 strings. They stumble your way, drawn by light, heat, and the promise of escape. You brace yourself, not against violence, but absurdity. Inside, the house is chaos, polished with routine. Smoke clings to the ceiling beams. The scent of cheap candles and cheaper perfume mingles with sweat and ale. Gertrude is awake now, face painted like a carnival mask. Beatrice is upright, somehow both conscious and completely gone. You take your place at the top of the stairs. You look down on the room like a ghost perched above its own unfinished story, and you wait. The clientele of the night drift in like a parade of broken dreams dressed in mud and mead. First, the toothless cooper who insists on singing before anything else. Always off-key, always too loud. Then the apprentice mason who claims he wants to kiss like a nobleman but mostly ends up drooling on your chin. There's the man who once paid in poultry and has returned to negotiate with eggs. And amid them all, there you are, standing just outside yourself, nodding politely, adjusting your smile like armor. You manage to avoid the worst of them. Barely. Your luck tonight is a blacksmith, a man with arms like tree trunks and a vocabulary the size of a spoon. He pays up front and keeps his words to a minimum. By local standards, that's a gift from heaven. You lead him up the stairs. The candle flickers with your passing. The hallway breathes its usual mixture of mildew and forgotten promises. In the room, the heat clings to everything. The mattress groans beneath his weight, and your mind retreats, as it always does, to a place beyond all this. A river, a field, a silence. When it's done, he falls asleep instantly. His snoring is the sound of a dying ox, guttural and endless. You nudge him with your toe. Nothing. You consider robbing him just for sport, but settle for extracting the remaining coin from his pouch with the finesse of a seasoned forager. You slip away before he rolls over and crushes you with the unthinking weight of sleep. Downstairs, the mood has shifted from drunken joy to disorder. Someone is shouting about a missing goblet. There isn't a clean one in the house. The madam is pacing, muttering curses in 3 languages. You recognize at least 2. Someone's playing dice with someone else's rent money, and the lute player from earlier is slumped against the door frame, cradling his instrument like a sick child. And then, as if the night hadn't quite peaked in absurdity, he walks in. A knight, or someone who calls himself one. His armor is mostly rust. His sword is decorative, possibly wooden. His breath smells like something died in a wine barrel and came back wrong. But he drags himself into the room with all the grandeur of a man who believes he's about to rescue someone, anyone, from something. He slams a coin purse onto the counter and declares that he's here for a maiden. The madam, ever the professional, points directly at you. You don't blink. This is far from the strangest request you've had this week. You lead him up the stairs, where he insists on taking each step valiantly. He recites a poem, badly, half of it about horses, the other half unintelligible. Inside the room, he demands a scene. You play along. He wants to save a damsel. You slump into a corner and sigh dramatically. He kicks over a stool and declares victory. You clap. He bows. Then comes the name. He wants to be called Sir Gilbert the Moist. You say it once with a straight face. You've said worse. He asks to be gentle. You explain gently that at this hour, silence and speed are gifts beyond gold. But he's nervous, trembling. His hands hesitate. His eyes dart. You guide him, not with seduction, but with the care of someone helping a confused librarian find the right scroll. When it ends, he hands you a gold coin and a pouch of herbs from his quest. You're 80% sure it's dried grass. He bows again, nearly knocks over the candle, and exits with a flourish that ends in a trip over the curtain. You sit in the quiet that follows, shoulders sinking, eyes heavy. And then, for the first time in hours, you laugh. Not because it was funny, but because absurdity is the only thing left standing between exhaustion and despair. The noise begins to thin, not stop. The drunkards haven't left, but they've passed the point of celebration and now hover in that liminal space between incoherence and collapse. The lute player is asleep, his instrument cradled like a second heart. Gertrude is snoring again, half on the hearth rug, one leg twitching like she's chasing something in a dream, perhaps a bishop, perhaps just a better life. Beatrice remains upright, but unmistakably unconscious, eyes open, mouth slack, posture noble in its defiance of gravity. The madam sits at the corner table with her abacus and her muttered curses. Her fingers move faster than her lips. She counts in whispers, curses in French, Russian, and the universal language of frustration. You know not to disturb her. This is her holy hour, when numbers become prayers and every missed coin is a betrayal. You retreat to your room, stripping off your bodice with the care of someone diffusing a trap. Your ribs ache. Your shoulders hum with the ghost of every touch that has not yet faded. You light the last stub of your candle, thick with old wax and the scent of animal fat, and place it on the table. Its light trembles, soft and stubborn. Your feet find the cold floor. You stretch your back. Something pops. You lie down onto the straw mattress, your body folding into its familiar hollows. The fabric scratches your skin, but the pain is minor. Expected. Familiar. Your hand brushes against the bundle of figs. You don't eat them yet. Not out of willpower, but because you want something sweet to belong to the morning. And then comes the sound, a squeak, then another. You sit up fast, eyes narrowing toward the base of your trunk. There, two small glints of reflected light. Rats. Again. The one with the scar, you've named him Robert, stares back at you like a roommate who doesn't pay rent but demands rights. You sigh, break off a crust of bread from earlier, and toss it across the room. Robert chases it, dragging his pride and his smaller companion with him. You'll set another vinegar trap tomorrow. It won't work. None of them do. But trying is the ritual, and rituals matter. They keep you sane, or close to it. From downstairs comes a final groan, then silence. You lean against the wall, your head rests on your arm, and for a moment, just a breath, there is calm. You're so tired, not just in the bones, but in the places that don't show. Your hair smells like candle smoke. Your hands bear the scent of every man who's passed through them. Your soul. Well, it's been quiet lately. It no longer objects. It just observes. And yet, in this stillness, there is peace. Not the kind written about in books. Not holy or warm. Just the absence of chaos. You eat one fig. It's dry. It crumbles at the edges. But it's yours, and it's sweet. You pull your thin blanket over yourself, frayed and full of holes, but better than bare air. You lie there, staring at the ceiling beam, the one you've hit your head on every night for 3 months, and this time you avoid it. You close your eyes. Sleep doesn't come gently. It doesn't rock you or kiss your brow. It falls on you like a sack of flour, sudden, heavy, final. And your last thought, before darkness wins, is not of men or money or escape. It is simply this: I survived another day. The dream should have lasted longer. You are somewhere warm, clean, your skin wrapped in silk that didn't itch or smell of mildew. A bed, soft, silent, and motionless beneath you. There were grapes, real grapes, plump, dark, kissed with dew. A man with all his teeth reciting poetry that rhymed and didn't involve livestock. Somewhere nearby, music floated like mist, and the air smelled like crushed rose petals and safety. But dreams are fragile things in places like this. A scream shatters the illusion. It pulls you up from the depths like a rope tied to your ankle. You wake with a gasp, head slamming into the ceiling beam you forget exists every single night. Pain blooms across your scalp. You curse softly, teeth clenched, breath fogging in the cold room. Outside your door, the shouting continues. Gertrude. Again. Her voice rises like a storm, shrill, slurred, indignant. She's arguing with the madam, something about a nobleman, a missing shoe, and an accusation involving 2 ducks in a chamber pot. You know better than to get involved. You bury your face in the straw, hoping the noise will pass. It doesn't. Instead, it escalates. A crash. Then something sharp. You said you were barren. You sigh. You sit up. Not because you want to, but because sleep is gone. Stolen. Your head throbs. Your neck aches. The cold presses against your skin like a judgment. Somewhere in the darkness, Robert the Rat is chewing on something that sounds suspiciously like your good shift. You make a mental note to check right after you regain the will to live. You grab your cloak, more whole than fabric, and wrap it around your shoulders. Then you poke your head into the hallway. Beatrice is sitting cross-legged near the pantry, munching on a raw turnip like it's a roast duck. She doesn't even look up. I give it 5 more minutes, she says, gesturing toward the brawl. Then someone gets slapped with a candlestick. You nod. That sounds about right. Back in your room, the candle has gone out. The warmth is long gone. You lie back down, eyes open to the dark, listening to the familiar chaos that never fully ends. You're not hoping for silence anymore, only for exhaustion to win. Eventually it does. Not sleep, just surrender. And that too is a kind of rest. Dawn arrives not as a blessing, but as an intrusion. It slips through the shutters like a thief, uninvited and unkind, casting grey light across the room. Not gold, not warm, just grey, like old bread, like regret. The air smells of mildew and the remnants of last night's wine. Somewhere, far below, someone empties a chamber pot into the alley. It splashes with the sound of resignation. You sit up slowly. You've learned not to move too quickly in the mornings. Your spine protests with a symphony of cracks, and your hips remind you that this life ages you faster than years can measure. Your cheek bears the faint impression of straw, like a badge from a battle you don't remember enlisting in. The hallway is quiet now. No more screaming, no more noblemen in disgrace. Just the soft snore of someone passed out in the pantry and the distant thud of boots from the tanners. They're already at work, hammering hides and dreams into leather. The smell wafts in, a thick, sour scent of flesh and brine, of labor and loss. You rise. Slowly. The straw mattress sighs in relief as if it's as tired of you as you are of it. Time to clean. The back room looks like the aftermath of a siege. Sheets soaked with stories no one will admit to telling. Candle wax spilled across the floor. Someone's boot sitting in a puddle of something that might once have been wine, or worse. You find a coin wedged in a crack between two floorboards. Likely from Sir Gilbert the Moist, his idea of subtlety was hiding coin like a squirrel hides nuts. You take it. Of course you do. You gather linens, arms full of damp fabric and half-forgotten sins, and head downstairs to the washtub. Marjorie is already there, elbow deep in cold water, humming a folk tune about drowning a cheating husband. You respect her consistency. The water bites at your fingers. You scrub anyway. You scrub like you're trying to erase not just stains, but memory. The wine from the bishop's nephew clings to the cloth like guilt. Someone's lost earring floats to the surface. It's not yours. You pocket it anyway. There's no honor in hunger. Beatrice wanders by, dragging a broom with all the enthusiasm of a condemned prisoner. Her eyes are far away, maybe in Venice, maybe in a world where breakfast doesn't taste like candle smoke. The madam is hunched over the ledger again, scratching at the ink like it personally offended her. She mutters curses between strokes. You don't ask which language. Someone has burned breakfast. Again. The bread is hard enough to chip a tooth. The cheese is sweating out its final dignity, and the tea, if it is tea, tastes like yesterday's regrets reheated with hope. You drink it anyway. It burns your throat and your stomach thanks you for remembering it exists. You hang the linens out to dry. The rope is sagging. The cloth flaps in the wind like surrender flags, like warnings, like ghosts. The sun is rising now. Truly. The market stalls begin to open. Butchers yell about kidneys. The fishmonger is cursing at a cat. Hooves clatter on the cobblestones. Life stirs. Not joyfully. Not with purpose, just as it always does. Out of habit, out of need. Inside, the brothel smells of stale beer, candle wax, and a lemon peel someone shoved into a corner weeks ago in a vain attempt at civility. The madam is barking again. Gertrude is still snoring, her head twisted at an angle that suggests demonic possession or simply a very bad night. Beatrice is examining a flea bite like it owes her money. You sit with a crust of bread and a fig that might be older than the Pope. You chew slowly, and then, for no reason at all, you laugh. Just once. Quiet and sharp. You laugh at the bishop's nephew and his trembling fingers. At the knight who called himself moist. At the merchant with molasses in his beard, at the man who tried to pay you in poultry, at Robert the rat and his stupid little scar. Because somehow, impossibly, unbelievably, you're still here. You're still standing. You are still pretending. You adjust your scarf, tighten your laces, and head toward the door. There's always someone on the other side of it with a very strange request. And you? You'll be ready. But stories never truly end. They bend, they branch, they bleed into others, and so we leave the narrow halls of one world to step into another entirely. A place where the air itself was worshipped, where fragrance wasn't vanity but philosophy, where the soul traveled on the breath of flowers and spice. Persia. In that world, scent was not just a lingering pleasure. It was a language, a theology, a way of touching the divine without ever lifting a hand. To walk into a Persian palace was not merely to see beauty, but to inhale it. The very walls whispered with rose water. Fountains did not only reflect starlight, they carried the perfume of orange blossom and myrrh. And the air, it was sacred. It had to be, because what touched the nose was believed to shape the soul. In these halls, incense was burned not to impress, but to purify. Letters between lovers were sealed with scent. Even the lowest merchant in the market might carry a vial of musk from far-off lands, or clove wrapped in silk. It wasn't indulgence, it was balance. To Persians, beauty without scent was incomplete. There were no sprays, no atomizers. There were oils. Thick, slow-moving elixirs created drop by drop through rituals older than the kingdoms themselves. To make a single dram of rose attar, hundreds of blossoms would be gathered before sunrise, crushed, heated, whispered to. The process was sacred. The result? A scent that could cling to fabric for decades, a memory bottled. Steam distillation, something the modern world takes for granted, was born here in the still rooms of Persian physicians and mystics. Avicenna, the philosopher, the healer, the architect of early science, perfected it not for chemistry, but for soulcraft. His rose water was medicine for body and heart. Even mosques were perfumed before prayer, not because God needed scent, but because humans did. They believed that pleasant smells attracted angels, that fragrance could stir forgotten truths, soothe sorrow, lift the veil between the ordinary and the eternal. And so, every aspect of Persian life was touched by aroma. Weddings bathed in jasmine, newborns welcomed with saffron. Even the dead were wrapped not only in cloth, but in perfume, so that their memory might rise gently. Like smoke, it was not luxury, it was identity. And in that world, the perfumer was not a tradesman. He was an alchemist. The perfumer, in those forgotten Persian cities, was a man of silence. He did not shout prices, he did not sell, he revealed. Behind doors carved with sacred geometry, he distilled not only flowers, but time itself.
His shelves held more than oil. They held memory, ambergris gathered from the ocean's belly after storms, musk from the glands of beasts caught between wilderness and myth, saffron plucked by moonlight from trembling petals, oud dark and dense extracted from trees wounded by time, and rose always rose collected before the sun could scorch their breath. Each bottle was a story, not in words but in sensation. You did not choose scent, it chose you. When a bride came, she did not ask, "What is pretty?" she asked, "What will keep him dreaming of me when I am far?" When a warrior returned, dust on his boots and blood in his eyes, he did not want gold. He wanted the smell of his mother's scarf. When a widow visited, she did not seek comfort in voice or verse. She asked to hold again the fragrance her husband wore the day he first spoke her name. The perfumer listened. And then, without a word, he would open a bottle, and the room would remember. Scent is the oldest language, older than writing, older than song. It is the language of instinct, of longing, of place. A boy who smells cardamom may see his grandmother's kitchen. A woman who catches sandalwood in the air may remember the prayer room of her youth. Memory lives in the nose, curled like smoke behind the eyes. The Persians understood this. They wrote of it in poems and prayers. In the courts of Shiraz, poets compared a lover's hair to musk, her breath to clove, her skin to rain on jasmine. Sufis inhaled rose as they spun, believing that fragrance could open the heart wider than any scripture. Even punishment had sent. Criminals might be denied it, or worse, marked by foul ones. Because to carry stench in that world was not just unpleasant, it was shame. And so the art of fragrance was guarded. Recipes passed like spells. Some oils took years to mature. A few, like Khushbu, made of 37 rare ingredients, were known only to one family per generation. They protected it like others protected thrones. But even outside the palaces, in the simple homes of weavers and potters, the tradition lived on. A mother might rub her baby's feet with rose oil, whispering blessings as she worked it into the skin. A girl might tuck dried orange peel into her hair before meeting her betrothed. A dying man might ask to smell camphor one last time, to clear his spirit for the journey ahead. Because in Persia, the soul left the body through the nose, and what it smelled last mattered. In the temples of Persia, the first thing one offered was not coin or chant. It was scent. Frankincense, slow to burn, rising like a question. Myrrh, dark and bitter, trailing behind it like sorrow. Sandalwood, ground into paste and pressed to the brow. Before words, before rituals, before even breath, there was perfume. Because the divine, they believed, did not speak in voices but in fragrance. When a priest entered the sacred chamber, he carried no torch. He carried a censer. Its thin chains swung with the rhythm of his steps, smoke spilling out in deliberate ribbons. The scent purified the space. Not for the gods had no need, but for the human heart, which forgets too easily what reverence feels like. To stand in a perfumed temple was to be reminded, you are not made only of flesh. You are atmosphere. You are what clings. In the gardens that surrounded these holy places, each plant was chosen not for color, but for memory. Citrus trees hummed with bees. Pomegranate flowers fell like blood onto white stone. And always the rose cultivated not just for beauty, but for oil. Every bloom bore lineage. Every root carried the echo of ancient hands. Even the wind was curated. Walls were shaped to catch it, slow it, turn it, so that when it passed through the blossoms, it brought with it a prayer you didn't need to speak aloud. You would walk through those gardens and feel your lungs soften, your pulse slow, not because of stillness, but because the air itself was alive. This was not luxury. This was design. The physicians of Persia understood that healing did not begin with poultices or leeches. It began with breath. They prescribed scent before they prescribed herbs. Jasmine to ease the melancholy, cypress for clarity, rose for the broken-hearted, camphor for the dying. Hospitals had scented corridors, not to hide illness, but to remind the patient of the world beyond it, to remind them they were still connected to the earth, to pleasure, to memory, to others. A man with a broken leg might be treated with splints, yes, but he would also be given a sachet of mint to wear near his chest, so that each inhalation reminded him of spring. A woman in grief might be wrapped in a shawl washed with orange blossom water, so she wouldn't drown in silence. They knew, what the world has largely forgotten, that the body may heal through touch. But the soul, it heals through scent. But nothing fragrant lasts forever. The wind changes. And with it, empires fall. Persia, once the garden of the world, began to forget its own scents. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, like the fading of a perfume from a lover's collar. Invaders came, some with swords, others with treaties. And though they crushed statues and set fire to libraries, what they truly destroyed was invisible. They trampled the rose fields not out of hatred but ignorance. They poured out jars of oud, thinking them wine. They sneered at the perfumers, calling them sorcerers. And the people, those who remained, began to breathe differently. Gardens were razed, temples turned to dust, recipes vanished, not in fire but in silence. A son forgot the scent his mother used on his cradle. A bride no longer rubbed saffron into her palms. A widow reached for the vial her husband once wore and found only glass, dry and echoing. Even the language changed. Where once poems compared breath to cinnamon, they now spoke of conquest. The body remained, but the atmosphere was gone. The shift wasn't sudden. That's the cruelty of forgetting, it disguises itself as progress. The merchants began importing foreign colognes. The rituals became decorative. Incense was burned only for guests, not the gods, and the madrasas no longer taught the medicinal properties of scent. They taught war, or worse, commerce. The perfumer's shop stayed open. For a while, dust gathered on his shelves. The rose oil turned bitter, the saffron molded, and the customers, fewer each day, stopped asking for memories. They asked for copies, they asked for cheaper. They asked for more. And one morning the perfumer did not unlock the door. No one noticed. What dies first is not the body of a civilization. It is its atmosphere, the way it breathes, the way it remembers. And so the air grew empty. Not foul, not rotten, just forgetful. Centuries later, in a city lit by screens and choked by glass, someone opens a drawer, not in a palace, not in a temple, but in a dusty corner of an antique stall tucked between a frozen yogurt shop and a parking garage. The air inside the drawer smells of paper, rust, and time that has stopped bothering to move. They are not looking for anything. That is when most important things are found. Their hand brushes against a small, round bottle. It is sealed with wax the color of dried blood. Its surface is uneven, hand-blown, with tiny air bubbles frozen like memories in glass. There is no label, no branding, no barcode. Just a faint etching at the base, a single Persian letter, half erased by centuries of touch. They hold it to the light. The liquid inside is thick, gold-dark. It clings to the glass like honey reluctant to part from its hive. They unseal it. And in that instant the world changes. The scent is not sharp, not chemical, not loud. It is quiet. Old rose, not fresh but dried under desert sun. A hint of burnt saffron. A shadow of sandalwood so soft it feels like breath on the back of the neck. And beneath it all, something that can't be named. Something like the air of a prayer said too often to still believe in, yet still whispered. They inhale again, and without knowing why, they close their eyes. They are no longer in the stall, no longer in the city. For a flicker of a moment, they are standing beneath pomegranate trees. The wind moves slowly. A woman is grinding clove with a stone bowl. A child is laughing behind a lattice of carved wood. A man, barefoot, is writing poetry on a wall with chalk. A procession of dancers moves past, their scarves perfumed with myrrh and orange blossom. The scent disappears quickly, too quickly. It doesn't linger, it never does. They look at the bottle. Their hand trembles slightly. No one around them notices. People pass by holding coffee cups and phones. A couple argues about GPS directions. A child cries for ice cream. The stall owner sneezes. Life moves on. But for the one holding the bottle, something is no longer the same. They put it to their nose one last time, trying to catch it again. It's already fading, not gone, just hiding, somewhere behind the noise. And as they tuck the bottle carefully into their coat pocket, with more reverence than they can explain, a thought occurs. What else have we forgotten? What else once surrounded us, shaped us, held us, and vanished not with fire, not with war, but with inattention? They walk home through the city's grid of light and exhaust, the bottle close to their heart. And the scent, that sacred whisper, lingers just long enough to ask one final question. When we are gone, what will our air remember? The bottle stays with them, tucked inside the inner pocket of a coat that has never held anything holy. They carry it not like an object but like a secret. It doesn't clink, doesn't leak, doesn't demand attention. And yet, since the moment they touched it, the world has changed. Not outwardly, not in any way that others would notice. But something has shifted. The light through windows looks different now. Sharper, quieter. The air in rooms feels thinner. Not colder, just emptier. The sounds of traffic, of advertisements, of laughter echoing down escalators feel strangely distant, like static on an old radio between songs. They go about their days checking messages, replying to emails, smiling at neighbors they don't know, but behind their eyes something else is happening. A tension, a tremble, a remembering that doesn't belong to them. They find themselves hesitating before opening doors, breathing in first, just in case. They lean into strangers on the train, not rudely, but curiously, wondering what their scent might say if the world still spoke that language. But all they smell is detergent, alcohol wipes, plastic, synthetics that mask but never reveal. They walk past perfume stores with flashing lights and celebrity faces, but none of the bottles call to them. They open one, once, a tester, amber-colored, called Desire Number 9 or Velvet Dust. It bites, it screams, it lingers like regret. They put the cap back on and step away, feeling as if they've just walked past a stage where someone is pretending to cry. At night they sit by their window. The city hums below, honking, flickering, constant. But their hand keeps drifting to their coat pocket where the little glass bottle waits. They don't open it again. Not yet. Because something inside them knows. This isn't a fragrance. It's a memory, a place, a warning. And if they inhale too deeply, they might never come back. They begin to dream differently, not of deadlines, not of beaches, not of pixelated fantasies designed by streaming algorithms. They dream of stone courtyards at dawn, of rosewater being poured over the hands of a guest, of smoke curling up from a brass bowl, of women grinding petals in the dark, humming lullabies to jars that would never bear their names. They wake with the smell of myrrh in their lungs, but their room smells of nothing. The next day, they stop on a bridge, not to cross it, not to pose for photos, just to stand. The wind comes in strong, cold, thoughtless, and yet for one strange moment it carries something with it, something almost sweet. Not floral, not fresh, but familiar. They close their eyes. And for the briefest second, the city falls away. In its place, a garden, fountains, the weight of heat, the silence of belief, the ache of something once sacred. When they open their eyes again, the scent is gone. Only the traffic remains. Only the steel rail beneath their hands. Only the sound of a city that never meant to remember anything. But in their pocket, the bottle is still warm. The search doesn't begin with intention. It begins with ache. They don't even realize it at first. They simply find themselves walking more, past their usual bus stop, down streets that are not shortcuts, through alleyways that feel older than the map. They begin to linger in places they used to pass. Bookstores, antique shops, a museum they hadn't visited since childhood. Their feet take them places their mind hasn't caught up to yet. Something deeper is guiding them. Something that moves not with logic but with longing. They stand before glass cases filled with oil lamps, with coins worn smooth by centuries, with ceramic jars etched with languages they can't read. A plaque says, "Perfume vessel, Sassanid Empire, c. 400 CE." They don't move, they stare. And in that moment it isn't the artifact they see. It's the absence. It's what isn't there. The scent is gone. The hands that poured into it gone. The lips that whispered over it gone. And yet something remains, a residue, not of oil but of intention, a memory that sits in the silence between glass and eye. They begin to read Avicenna, Zal, Hafez, the poets who wrote in fragrance, the doctors who distilled the soul, the mystics who believed scent was the breath of the divine. They fill notebooks with fragments they don't understand yet, sentences underlined without knowing why, diagrams of stills, sketches of gardens, glossaries of herbs and trees they've never touched, words like adder soul of a flower, cold darkness made holy, Gallia, a perfume so sacred it was locked in gold, Itter, the silence between the body and God. The world around them feels louder now, sharper, more artificial. Every commercial they pass that screams about scent feels like a lie, not because scent is wrong but because it's been hollowed out, made transactional, reduced to branding and celebrity. They look at people in line for new fragrances and wonder, what are they really looking for? Who are they trying to remember? One evening, they visit an old apothecary in a forgotten quarter of the city. The walls are lined with glass bottles, real ones, heavy, unlabeled, filled with liquid that glows like candlelight. The man behind the counter is old. His hands tremble, but his eyes do not. He sees the bottle in their coat pocket before they take it out. He doesn't ask where they got it. He only nods and says, "That is not perfume, that is prayer." They don't reply, because somehow they already knew. He lets them smell one oil, just one. A single drop placed on a clay dish warmed by breath. It smells of burnt fig leaves and lemon rinds crushed by thumb, of spice carried on the robes of a long-dead prophet, of dust, yes, but not ordinary dust, sacred dust, the kind that knows how to wait. They close their eyes, and when they open them again, the tears are already there. They don't wipe them. The old man does not sell them anything. He only says, "When you are ready, go where the scent came from." They ask, "Where?" He shrugs. "Where it always comes from, where someone loved something so much they tried to trap its breath in glass." They never learn who made the perfume. Not the name of the perfumer, not the temple, not the garden where the petals once bloomed. They never trace the bottle back to its origin. And that's okay. Because some things are not meant to be solved. Some things are meant to be carried. So they carry it, not for answers, but for memory. They keep it on their desk, sometimes in a drawer, sometimes on their nightstand. They open it only once in a while, not to smell, but to remember what it means to smell, to be alive enough to notice. The world doesn't change around them, but they change within it. They breathe differently now. They listen differently. They leave rooms a little slower, letting their warmth linger. And sometimes, when no one is looking, they whisper into the air, "May what I leave behind be kind." That too is legacy. That too is enough.